Hello and welcome to the Next 100 Days podcast. My name is Graham Arrowsmith.
And my name's Kevin Appleby. Graham, what do you know about neuroscience?
This is a podcast that's dedicated to Jan Sky. I could talk about neuroscience for hours.
That's very light. Maybe 5 minutes at the most, Graham.
Right. Well, maybe, but a bit more at the end of all this. But Jan Sky is sat in an office right next to the Gold Coast. She's in Queensland, Australia. Jan, welcome to the Next 100 Days podcast.
Thank you, Graham, and thank you, Kevin. Very pleased to be here.
You know, you have you in your website, it says you've got more than 30 years experience. Now, you must have started when you were about 12-year-old. How have you managed all that?
Well, thank you for the compliment. But I've been in business for 30 years. Yes, that's exactly right. It's only more recently that I've came across neuroscience. I've always had an interest in the brain and behaviour and what's going on upstairs while we're paddling along with our feet on the bottom.
Yeah.
But it was just 2 years ago that I graduated from uni in Applied Neuroscience.
All right. So you went back to university as a mature student and did another degree.
A very mature student, yes.
Okay, fair enough. And so, what was that specific degree in? What was it? What were you studying? Did you say applied?
Yes.
What does it mean, that though?
It's part of a degree, because to study neuroscience, you actually have to go down the pathway of some other modalities, such as psychology, and then master in neuroscience, but I was more interested in the application of it. So knowing, like, when a person is behaving in a particular way, they're just what's going on in the brain, first of all, and then the reasons behind that. There could be some other reasons that are preventing them from performing to their best in the workplace, or maybe you're noticing things like they're taking lots of days off work and it's not like them, or they're not showing up at meetings, or when they are showing up, especially on the online meetings, they're keeping their camera off, which is quite unusual for them. They're usually bright and bubbly. So I know we're sounding a little bit like mental health well-being in saying that, but in fact, neuroscience is about the brain. Right. And it's about helping. So from my perspective, it's helping leaders to have an understanding that if something's going on with one of their team members, it's not just to jump in and do a performance management straight away.
So is that how you like Red Adair? You're sort of, you come in and cap the sort of the well sort of thing. Is that your how do people find you, and under what circumstances do they say, I need Jan?
Well, I guess if they're struggling with losing their talent turnover, for example, those people that are being poached by other organizations, if that's the correct word.
Yeah.
They're noticing that because they're putting on new staff or constantly, which means that they've lost staff, but productivity is down, it's dropping. Maybe they're noticing there's not a lot of team collaboration, and of course, who's responsible for that? Well, leaders are responsible. But
right.
Changing organizational structures, cultures, etc., comes from a top down. So I like to engage with those people who have the power to make a difference. Put changes in place.
Is that one of those things that you set up for the podcast that says, oh, I don't like it, give me a call just in about 5 minutes in, that I can get out of there, there's a fire in the building.
Done that actually.
I did actually. One of my former bosses asked me to do that. I was so embarrassed. Come in after 5 minutes and say, you've got a call, you've got to answer. There's an emergency at home. Everybody knew it was a lie, but anyway, by and by. Maybe there's probably a neuroscientific reason for that, I suspect, in his case. But it was embarrassing at the time. But so if you had to define neuropsychotherapy, in our terms, because Kevin's smarter than I am, but I'm curious.
Well, if I start with a psychotherapist, that's a person who studies a range of different modalities and then apply them in a clinical situation.
Right.
So same thing applies, but just with the addition of the word neuro means that in the application of different modalities in a therapeutic setup, and I'll move from that in a moment, the person, me, has an understanding of what's going on in the brain. So from a therapeutic perspective, I can let the person know that actually what your reaction is a normal reaction to an abnormal event. And it's, going on in that limbic region of your brain. And they go, oh, where's the limbic region? And then I can show them, I can either draw a quick picture or show them. And often I use my hand to describe the brain.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But, and that's, so that's explaining the term with the word therapist on the end. What I've done, although I still work in a therapeutic capacity, I've stepped outside the realms of therapy to produce a leadership program.
Ah, right. Okay. So I'm struggling a little bit here, Jan, so you're going to have to help sort of make it clearer for me to understand. You help organizations with their thought processes or overcoming some of the inadequacies that you think are related to parts of the brain?
I help leaders in organization to understand their own brain and their own brain's potential. And in doing so, help them to understand their team better and to help bring about a lot more collaboration. Right. And in doing that, increase productivity and bottom line, which is what organizations are looking for.
And can you sort of exemplify, can you provide an example of how that actually can manifest in a setting with a corporate? So you get in there, you've got these people round a table, or they're all in separate rooms. I don't know quite how you do it, but basically you somehow sprinkle some magic dust over the whole situation, and lo and behold, a few months later they're hitting record sales. I mean, how is it you're actually helping in corporate?
I'd love to have some of that magic dust. It's about helping people to identify what behaviors are not working for them. I see. For example, there might be a leader who's so results driven and so process driven that he or she is forgetting about it's the people who are using their skills to get the end result, and to help them understand that just by perhaps introducing, well, this is sounding so simple now, but introducing a little bit of empathy or understanding, or just asking the person, hey, are you okay? I've noticed you haven't been yourself lately. When they notice a difference in productivity.
Right. So, okay. So but your services for corporate, you would actually have to get to know people, wouldn't you? Or at least understand what other people are saying about them for you to be able to help them.
Yes. And I've actually teamed up just recently with a guy who has a skills survey or skills analysis survey.
Right.
And we're looking at working together a little bit more regularly, so that because organizations look for skills gaps. And if you've got something that's tangible and they recognize that of their 20 leaders in the organization, 10 of them have got huge skills gaps, then in the delivery of my training and coaching, I can identify those skills gaps.
Right. So it's not a sort of purist brain thing. It's slightly more than that, I guess. what the delivery that you're it seems you're talking about things that you wouldn't need to be trained as a neuropsychotherapist in. Do you see what I mean? You could almost observe that, couldn't you?
Oh, absolutely. But then if you observe it, how do you bring about the change?
Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. Yeah. So that's the next step. So basically one thing is saying, yeah, there's 10 people with a substantial skills gap, but then how do you impact that situation on behalf of the company?
And then collectively, I get those 10 people together because we run our program, our main program runs over 8 weeks. So there's 1 week of group online learning, and then a fortnight later, there's the next session, and then a fortnight later. But on the weeks in between, I've got specialized coaches who work one-on-one with that leader to help them not only have they understood the learning that took place during the training session, but how then can they apply that to make a difference in their workplace?
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. That makes. Yep. So, Jan, when it comes to applying the neuroscience, how exactly does that work? I can see that we're looking at skills, we're looking at skills gaps, we're doing some coaching to help sort that out. I don't quite get how the neuroscience then fits in.
Well, without neuroscience, nothing happens. Like, we wouldn't be sitting here talking to each other right now unless we had some activity going on in our brain.
No. Well, Kevin would. He's a Newcastle United fan, so they're all like that. You know, just sit there blankly and turn up at St James Park every other night and worship at the god of the black and whites. But basically, as far as you're concerned, you are absolutely right. Everything goes on in here, doesn't it? So you know, the ability to spot those people who are suffering. Well, is it? I don't know. This is one of the things, isn't it? Is it all about mental? What's this current phrase? Mental illness,
awareness.
Mental awareness. But I mean, at the end of the day, if somebody's just having a bad time of it at the moment, then you've got to be pretty crass not to notice it, wouldn't you? If you're a colleague and you just completely ignored it, and if you're a manager or a leader of some sort, then you're not all that great at your job.
Oh, absolutely. I was working with a group of people this morning, and one of the team members in the group just divulged, it just came up that her mother-in-law was in hospital. She's in her 80s. So the father-in-law, of course, was going in every day, and it was whatever the condition was, it was certainly something that wasn't able to be fixed. It was an end-of-life process.
Right.
She couldn't understand why Dad kept going in, and that was fine. That's okay, because she's a very process-driven person. But I was sitting with the manager of this team, and at the end of it, she said, I never knew that was going on in Robin's life. She never divulged that to me, and nor did she have to. But she says, it made me a little bit aware that if Robin's is a bit off on a day, there's a reason behind it. But that's a very simple example, I think. Let's go back to what drives us, and that's our brain.
Yeah.
A lot of people with these skills gaps don't even recognize they have the skills gaps. And they're behaving this way, they have been behaving this way forever. Everything's fine, I'm functioning. Yeah. What's wrong with it? It's everybody else, perhaps. So in order to change a behavior, someone has to either be told or recognize that their behavior or their way of performing in the workplace isn't appropriate or isn't achieving the results that the organization is looking for.
Yeah.
And it's not simply a performance management plan. It's an understanding what it's going to take for them neurologically to change so that behaviorally there's a difference.
Back in the day when I worked in corporate, and Kevin came from corporate as well, we'd have these awful things called where you'd get together with your staff every year or so, appraisals, and you'd be some people have done well in some areas and others, and you'd start getting into the other reasons why. I mean, the thing is about an appraisal, it should never be a surprise to anybody, should it? But at the end of the day, if you've talked to that person all the way through and you've been, there with them, you kind of know what the issues are. But I think where you're taking this, it's in a new area, I think, is that you can see that there's a performance lapse or an underperformance, but what you're doing now is using the techniques to do with, I don't know, manipulating the brain or soothing it in some way to actually help beget that improvement in performance. Am I characterizing this right? Is this what you're actually doing with your interventions?
Yeah. Yes, I hadn't worded it that way, but if you take any behavior, just as simple as cleaning your teeth at night, there's a cluster of neural pathways in your brain that go, oh, here she goes, or here he goes. He's got his brush and he's putting the paste on and off he goes.
Yeah.
We don't even think about it. So some of these behaviors in the workplace that are, and I use the word inappropriate, but I mean it in that they're not good functioning behaviors. Often people don't recognize that what they're doing is pulling the team down, is stopping the team from functioning to their best, to peak performance, whatever the terminology is we want to use.
So you identify it's where, all right, where does this start? So effectively you would come in and it wouldn't take you long to identify these sorts of disability, I'm trying to find the right word here, but these behaviors that are actually leading to a poorer performance. And you can then apply certain methods to actually help that team, that person, the group of people to improve their performance. Is that where you're going?
I guess what we look at is the team performing to peak performance?
Sure.
No.
Right. Okay.
And so it's not just the team, but it's that leader, that manager who's responsible for getting, or maybe it is that the employees shouldn't be employed there, but mostly it's pace of the leader, pace of the pack.
So, Jan, you've identified that there's some behaviors that aren't optimal, let's say, going on, and as you say, there's things like the teeth cleaning exercise, they're going on autopilot. So you've got to somehow change the neural pathways and get different behavior. So how does that process work? And that's got to be difficult when so much stuff is just happening on autopilot. That's the way things get done around here. This is the way we always do it. Things that are so ingrained in the organization that are, I'm not going to say toxic, but not beneficial. How do we actually go about changing them?
Well, I think we start with the end in mind. If I can grab a phrase from Stephen Covey, what is the end result you want? The team aren't up to scratch at the moment, but what do you want to see? And, so once they can identify that, so then what behaviors from that team leader or that manager need to change to assist the team? And if the leader can change, the team has a greater chance of changing as well.
Can a leopard change its spots, though, Jan? I mean, it sounds like it's a heck of a task, isn't it? But that's what you do. I mean, you're literally changing the leopard spots, aren't you?
Well, luckily, we don't all wear the spots like the leopard does, and we can change our clothing just as much as we can change our behavior.
I'm just thinking I'm part of a team where I'm part of a team that's a leaders that's kind of, I don't know, like you were saying earlier, that, it's very focused on outcomes, etc., and doesn't give a monkeys about the team. You just will do it this way or you're off. And all of a sudden they become lovey-dovey and they're asking about their mother-in-laws, etc. And that must create sort of a cognitive dissonance in the mind of the team.
Yes, if it happened overnight, it certainly would. But behaviour change doesn't happen overnight.
No, okay, fair enough. I'll buy that. Okay. Yeah. So it doesn't happen overnight. And you did say that, your course is over time.
Yes, and then the coaching is ongoing after that.
And I guess the team will notice the behavioural change incrementally anyway, so it won't be quite as shocking. It's almost like they're prompted to expect a change as well.
Yes, and I think it would be wise of the manager to share the fact that they were undergoing some training. Yeah. And they might notice some changes. And if they do, it's fine to speak up. That's part of engagement.
Yeah. I noticed in your brainpotential.net website, you've got leadership powered by neuroscience, and you've got 4 key learnings. The first of which is insight into how your patterns of thoughts, feeling, and behaviors influence your work performance. And that we've kind of touched on already, but basically you will actually be launched in and sort of is it an information gathering exercise, this insight? Is that, are you just trying to get the elements of what's going on? Is that what it means by insight?
Yes, prior to starting any type of the training and the coaching program, I have one-on-one meetings with these managers just to assess where they're at, where they'd like to go, what they'd like to change.
So when you're out at dinner parties, everybody else with you are thinking, "Oh, good God, she's analysing me." Is it like? Do you remember the Faulty Towers episode when the psychotherapist turned up? I'm sure you use that in your presentations. But Basil reacted really badly, didn't he? And for anybody younger than about, I don't know, 35, then you'll have to Google it. But obviously you're doing some research, aren't you? So basically, from that point of view, it's I like the fact that you're doing that. Does that throw up some interesting sort of observations?
Well, yes. I think everybody is a little guarded when they're first interviewed, so to speak, and probably trying to put their best foot forward. Yeah. But there's some questions and there's ways of asking. I sit in a space of curiosity because I am curious about people anyway, and I like to know about them. Yeah. And it's amazing what they reveal to me prior to even undertaking this.
That's why Kevin's silent today, because he didn't want to really reveal anything.
I was just
beads of sweat.
I was just going to ask Jan, what questions she'd ask you, Graham?
Oh God, no. Well, she's had enough information from me. She'll be writing down a little, get him off the podcast. He's a danger to the humanity. But no. Seriously, I like you. I am curious about people, and I guess the questions come from that curiosity, because I really want to understand what it is what's your secret sauce, because that's why you're on. I mean, we're sharing some of the best people in the world's observations, and you're in a really interesting area. You're talking about the brain. We've never had anybody on talking just about the brain, Kevin.
No, we haven't.
And it's just
like you, I'm fascinated at how you change behavior.
Yeah.
A lot of the things that I do are in the change management area. And as Jan said, change starts from the top of the organization. But you've got to have the leader performing in such a way that the leader takes the team with them. Mm. And getting the behavior right in order to do that is quite a tricky thing.
what was what can you remember back to when you sat with one of these people, one of these clients, and what was the most startling observation that you recall, the sort of thing that you recall and tell friends, or maybe not, details of it, but enough detail that said, actually, this was startling to me? I mean, you might have had a serial killer. I don't know. I mean, leaders come in all shapes, don't they? But what was the most startling observation that you found when you were talking to these people before you started your therapy?
I think when people don't realize that their behavior is bordering on either bullying or harassment, it's, and how it makes the person feel because they are that way. And I say bordering on because in Australia, we call that's something you call. We don't, and you're probably the same in the UK. We don't stand for bullying and harassment, but they have it's because of the thought process that are going on. And it's like they, rather than stopping and thinking, they just open their mouth and blurt the things out. That really makes the other person or other people in the team feel quite uncomfortable. And it's like, well, if they can't take it, why don't they just go? Or, they're not understanding that it's their verbal behavior or their dialogue, I should say, that's actually impacting the performance of their team members. That's something that astounds me. And that's probably one of the simplest things to change, because it's just a tweaking of dialogue then. But if I can just go back to behavior and changing behavior, and I'd use that simple example of brushing your teeth.
Yeah.
If tonight you swap hands and use your non-dominant hand to do the action, now you could end up with some white toothpaste, or blue or pink or whatever color you use, all over it in the wrong places. But if you're consciously aware of what you're doing, it will demonstrate how difficult it is to actually change something that you've been doing for 50 years.
Yeah.
But what you do when you brush with the opposing hand is you're firing different neurons down different pathways.
Right.
So that old way of brushing your teeth, that cluster of neural pathways is still there.
Yeah.
Just because we've done it once successfully doesn't mean we've mastered it. But we need to practice and practice and practice until it's not so uncomfortable. And then we know that when we go into use of terminology autopilot, the autopilot way of delivering a message, the autopilot way of selling a new computer system into the team, the autopilot way of getting some collaboration and achieving goals.
So you would actually train as sort of a hosepipe dialogue leader to almost like take a step back and almost not talk in a meeting, maybe set the framework, then allow others to talk. Is that the sort of progression that you're looking at?
If that was what was required, yes, right. Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's a change of behavior, but you will express that change in terms of the way in which the brain works. And as a really good example with the, using, in my case, the left hand to clean the teeth. But we have people to do that in our household. There's a little chat.
Clean your teeth?
No, I'm only kidding. No, it's not true.
That gave me a very strange mental image there. Somebody else cleaning your teeth, Graham.
It's imagine being so rich that you'd have somebody come along, clean my teeth for me, please. That would be too much, wouldn't it? But this is all about emotions, isn't it? And the way in which you react to things.
It's about thoughts, emotions, and behaviors.
Right.
And it's about the messages that we tell ourselves. I'm not good enough. Oh, I'm a failure. I can't manage this.
We had that a few weeks ago on this podcast. This what was it called, Kevin? Imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Yes.
We had a whole show on that, so we're expert at that now.
Good.
We're not really experts at anything. That's the beauty of this podcast, is that it makes you, a jack of all trades and master of none. But the beauty is, if you can spot it, then you can find somebody to help you. But so all these thoughts, emotions, the reactions to various things. These are the elements that you work on.
Yes, because we can't stop our thoughts. We wouldn't want to stop our thoughts. We can't stop. They're there constantly. Yeah. But we can train ourselves to calm the thinking, to take out the judgment, to whatever's necessary.
You can train people to stop judging people, can you? Seriously, you can do that. I mean, I'm asking for a friend, but you can actually stop people from judging people. Is that true?
If they want to.
Oh, right.
I can't judge anyone.
Well, this friend of mine, I can't imagine that they'll line up for it. But,
right.
But how would you go about helping that sort of stopping judging people?
Well, I guess what's the judgment based on? Is it based on reality, or is it I'm not asking you this question. These are just statements, Graham.
No,
but is it based on beliefs from when they're a little child, and their parents taught them not to like this and not to talk to those people, or you have to really dig down in it and say, and I guess it's then teaching acceptance.
Yeah. No, I think that's very true. I think sometimes certainly in my own case, I think acceptance is one of those things I have worked on in lots of different situations, because it's so easy to be sort of fairly glib and come out with a judgment about people. But at the end of the day, I guess it's an age thing, or at least I'm excusing it on an age thing, that, when you get over 40, well, your attitudes change. When you get over 50, and now when you get over 60, who gives a damn? But, at the end of the day, and I don't know whether that's almost it sort of, makes it even more likely that you're not going to change. But I mean, is age a factor, or can you change a 70-year-old? Kevin needs to know that.
I changed.
Oh, right, cool.
Yep.
Yeah. I graduated from university when I was 71.
Wow.
And that was 2 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And this is why I'm so excited about the potential of the brain, because, yes, our brain doesn't fully mature until we're 25.
Right.
So post 25, we've got an aging brain.
Oh.
However, to prevent things like Alzheimer's and early onset dementia, etc., coming on, if we learn new things, we will keep those neurons firing. And there's trillions of neural pathways in our brain. Some of them we don't use very much anymore. And if that happens, they prune away and we don't need them. But we can still grow new ones. And we don't stop growing while we're still learning or doing new things.
Oh, I love that. I absolutely love it. I don't know about you, Kevin, but it just seems to me that this podcast, we should really do it until one of us croaks, Kevin, because to be honest with you, it'll keep you young. Because you're finding people, as long as people want to have a conversation with us. But the point is, you're finding out new things all the time. And you've said several things today, which I'm thinking, oh, hold on a minute. There's something in this. The issue, of course, I'm still trying to get to grips with. Somebody's going to pay you hard money to change their behaviors, emotions, relationships, you name it. At the end of that, you've got a result for them. So presumably your model is on the basis of you pay me up front, or is it a bit up front? And by the way, if we achieve this, you pay me a lot more.
No, they pay up front.
Okay.
They pay up front for the training and coaching.
Yeah.
But I can work with them longer if they need that.
Got you. Yeah.
You asked me about a point of difference, and I believe that the point of difference is not just in the education. That's just one component. The point of difference is in taking that education and working one-on-one with an individual in between the educational component, right, to help them make some changes and to help them implement this new learning into their workplace.
Are the clients that you serve, are they mainly commercial or are they mainly public?
Now, just Council. Because I'm in Australia.
Yeah, but I mean, sorry, commercial as in, is it, businesses? Government or is it mainly government or is it mainly commercial businesses?
I've actually had a mix of both government at local level. Local level is what we call councils. You probably do the same.
Yeah.
Local level and also in the private sector.
Private sector, yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. So it's a mix. Do you notice any kind of differences between private and public employees?
Yes. Often in the government sector, there's a lot more resistance to change. I've found.
Yeah.
Because
I don't know why that would surprise me, Jan. It really would. But I wonder whether or not that it's almost self-fulfilling, that they potentially select people who are more like that anyway. Don't rock the boat. One of the questions on the application is, don't rock the boat now. And any other refer to the first point. I don't know. Is that it? Maybe, I don't know.
I've seen a lot of change at a local level because I must admit that it's in the government sector that we call it here. Local level is local council level.
Yeah.
They're a lot more willing to embrace change.
Right.
And maybe it's just that I find it easier that they will come on to the programs and easier for me to work with them. But there's always people, and no matter what sector of the workforce you're talking about, I've been here for 20 years and I don't see why I have to change.
Yeah. That's a fairly common one when we're looking at a big change project. Why do we need to do this? Or the individuals say, "Oh, we've tried that before; it didn't work last time." Yeah. Now, what's interesting here for me, Jan, is working in the change field, that you're always looking at, from a leader's point of view, how do I get the team to change? Now, you're flipping this around and saying, how do you get the leader to change? Now, that's really, really interesting. That's a different dynamic to the one that I'd normally be working with. Yeah.
Our workbook or our educational sessions, there's 4 of them, and the first 2 are looking at change in the person, the leader, and what constitutes change. The other 2, the second 2 are about applying that into their team and how can they effectively manage change within the team, the people in the team.
Yeah.
I noticed. Sorry, Jan. I noticed from your website as well. You had a lady called Janelle Kemp, who's director of Kemp Recruitment, which sounds like a private firm, and she said that Jan Sky's understanding of neuroscience is exceptional, and her delivery style is one that enables understanding at all levels. My team was transformed to work at a higher level, demonstrating greater collaboration between each other. What an outcome. I mean, it's one of those things that you hope that Janelle, in this particular case, has almost like a persistent improvement. after your involvement.
Yes, and she is one of these CEOs that really cares for her team. In fact, in a few weeks' time, I'm flying back down to Sydney to do some more work with the team. She's someone who's switched on to continuous improvement.
Yeah, I that seems likely. So I suppose if you want somebody to help you with recruitment in Australia, then do Kemp Recruitment. Hey, as a free ad for her. But basically, Jan, if you had to sort of help companies in other parts of the world, like the UK, America, etc., the English-speaking world tends to listen to this podcast. But if you had to help them, is it something that you would do? I mean, you would do it on Zoom or something like that, would you? Is that how you would help them? You wouldn't necessarily fly across to America.
No, the program's set up to be totally online. Although I have done a lot of physical work in Finland and India and the USA, but that was pre-COVID times.
Got you.
And our world is different today, isn't it? I mean, it's a wonderful place to live. Look at us talking across the world.
Yeah, I mean, before long, you'll be getting your bikini on and going down to that Gold Coast, just round over the top there, and lounging on the beach. I mean, what a place to live.
September on the Gold Coast is probably still a bit cold for that, Graham.
Oh, right, I suppose so. Yeah,
I still have a jersey and a scarf.
Well, this is the jersey. It's September 1st, of course, and when we're recording this, and it's just changed today. It just feels just a little chilly today. But my wife and I are going away for a holiday for a few days as of tomorrow morning, so I'm quite looking forward.
Lovely.
You know what? You have been an absolutely wonderful guest on the next 100 Days podcast.
So, Graham, you must know a bit more about neuroscience now.
A bit more, yes, for sure. And I think the kind of work that Brain Potential and Jan Sky does for clients is a little clearer. And there's obviously an awful lot of understanding of the way that the brain works for them to be able to help change the way in which the brain works. I mean, the biggest obvious learning was when she was talking about brushing your teeth with the opposite hand. And when you start thinking that through in terms of behavioral change, you can understand the types of work that she will do with people.
Yeah. And if I'm teaching change management, one of the first things I might do, I'll get people to fold their arms. I'll ask you to do it now, Graham. Fold your arms.
Oh, yeah. You've done this before, haven't you? Yeah.
And then fold them the opposite way.
Yeah. And it's
how do I do that?
It's not the easiest thing.
So what's the first thing you want to do? You want to change back to the way you were before.
Yeah. Yeah. And I understand that.
There's a neural pathway that's telling you how to fold your arms. Change,
because you've always done it that way.
You've always done it that way. Change feels very uncomfortable for those reasons.
Yeah, but Jan did make that point, didn't she? And it isn't going to be an overnight thing.
Yeah, and I think when we're trying to change in the organization, as the leader, you're focused on how do I get my people to change? How do I get my people to accept the new way of doing things? So on. But very, very, very rarely do you reflect on, well, what do I need to do different?
Yeah. I mean, you made that point, didn't you? You made the point. It's quite focused on the leader.
Jan starting with the leader to me is very, very interesting. But I suppose ahead of that, you've got to get to some point where you've got to recognize you need to change. And I think in a lot of organizations with I hesitate to use the word toxic culture, but you know what I mean, Graham.
I've worked in one.
Relationships between the boss and the rest of the organization aren't great. There's the unfortunate thing is Jan's probably going to struggle to ever do anything there because there's got to be a realization by the leader to start off with. There's the need for them to change.
Yeah, I think the most that can happen is departments become more productive, and then and then go from there, I guess. But it's like the idea of eating an elephant, and I think it's that type of thing when you've got such an organisation that's that manages to survive, but that might be something like a public organisation, which will survive anyway, but it's just not a very welcoming and place, certainly to work in. And people might go home stressed and all the rest of that. And you do feel for people like that. Interesting.
Yeah, and I've rarely seen that sort of thing in a public organisation. There tends to be an awful lot more awareness around in those sorts of organisations. I've seen it more commonly when there's a CEO in an organisation of a particular character, and that is very, very driven by the product, by expanding business, and is very, very much so. Here's the latest thing that we've got to do. Let's just get on and do it, and push all the time, and probably doesn't think about the team behind it at all.
Yeah, I would have loved to have explored that a little bit more with Janet at some stage, because basically, if you've got that kind of environment, I think you get drawn along by the sort of the rush of getting towards that target versus the stability of, it's the same as last year as the year before, etc. In maybe a public environment, don't often see that radical change that you would in a much more focused change that you might have got in a private organization, being led by hopefully a leader with character and all the rest of that, even though their behaviors might be different. And I just wonder whether or not one's necessarily bad versus, because I just get the impression sometimes in these sort of public settings that it's almost like a false calm in the sense that they know every policy got known to man, but actually do they give a damn about their colleagues? And I wonder, I just wonder whether that's the case or not. Is it just a bit too woo and not actually what people really want to actually bring the best out of them? Because if they don't follow a big dream, then how can they be internally motivated to do their best work? Anyway, I'm rambling, Kevin, but and on that rambled point, today you've had Jan Sky, and you can get her on brainpotential.net. She's out there in Queensland, Australia. She's been a wonderful guest. And today, I've been Graham Arrowsmith.
I've been Kevin Appleby. Goodbye.
Goodbye.